Hey guys, welcome to my new video and today we're going to be discussing a lot about self-harm, and we're also going to be talking a lot about depression. Now these two subjects, I feel like they are very taboo, but at the same time I feel like they are subjects that need to be discussed, and I feel like there's a lot more exploration that needs to go into this subject, as I kind of feel like there's not a lot of people that like to discuss it or are open about the subject. So with this video as well, I'm going to be talking about some celebrities that have actually committed self-harm and to the reasons to why they did that. Now also, I'm not blaming anyone in this video, so I don't want to give that impression with some of the things how I am saying it, but I will say that when it does come to the therapy side, I do feel like the therapy side was a little bit lacking on their side. And especially when we get into Chester's story, some of the stuff that his therapist was saying, some of those things I didn't really agree with, and sometimes it is harder to get help because of that judgment that you might be getting, or maybe how the therapist will express themselves. So that's kind of what I really wanted to touch on in this video as well. So anyways guys, let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy the video. Some people don't understand that there are different levels of depression. Not everybody has the same type of depression. So for example, you might be a person that, say, you have a bad day and this is what's making you depressed, but then the next day you feel fine, you feel like it's all good, and you can kind of move on with your life. But there's other people that kind of feel like they just don't want to get out of bed. It could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. You just don't want to do anything, you don't want to see anybody. You kind of just feel like, screw everybody, like I don't want to talk to anybody. But again, I feel like it's something that people don't really understand, because I mean, sometimes people give you this look of, you could just get over it, or like, it's not that bad, or it'll be better, or, you know, eventually things will be fine, but they don't understand that sometimes things won't be fine. Like things just keep getting worse and worse. And I mean, again, Chester does talk also about, getting help and making sure that you kind of get out of that way of thinking, because otherwise, you will kind of end up being worse than you are. And I agree to a point, but as you can see that it doesn't necessarily work, especially for his case. But, I will say as well, and just to clarify, I will be talking also about Robin Williams in this video, but I do want to say that his depression is, again, another different kettle of fish. And again, this is why I want to really, really emphasize what the different levels of depression are, because people experience things differently. And especially when it comes to suicide, people have a different reason for doing what they do. Chester's reason and Robin Williams' reason slightly different for what they did, and I will talk about that. So the four celebrities I'm going to be talking about today, there's going to be Chester, there's also going to be Robin, there's also going to be DMX, and there's also going to be Anthony Bourdain. Now, all four of these guys are people that I grew up with, and these are people that I really, really admired. And seeing how bad their life got and how rough it was, and how, even just things with, say, for example, with DMX, like his drug habits and how he's trying to kick it and he was trying to get help, but like, people just didn't understand that relapses happen, and sometimes you can't break that cycle of relapse. And it's not as easy as people think it is. So let's have a look at some of these celebrities and the different things that they went through. So first up, we have Anthony Bourdain. Now, he was one of my favorite chefs growing up. Now, I know he ended up changing his career and he ended up doing food journalism, and he would explore the world. But he was such an amazing person. Especially, he was one of the first people to really kind of open up people's way of thinking and changing their mentality of when they travel overseas and trying new things, and not just judging everything by how it looks, and then not always just necessarily judging a place by how it looks. Because obviously sometimes, you can go to a country and something looks, not that great, and you're kind of like, I want to avoid that. I only want to go to these fancy restaurants and things like that. It's like, no, he changed that mentality of people's thinking. So this is why I had a lot of respect for this guy. Now, Anthony went through a lot of depression in his life. He had a lot of problems with, drug addiction. He had a really bad alcohol addiction as well, and it impacted his life greatly, especially with his family and just his work and just other things that was happening with him. But he still stayed that solid person, and he always tried to help people where he could. And as you can see from the quotes up above, he's saying like, yeah, you could just stay all day, smoking weed and watching cartoons and drinking and things like that, but you can't always do that. You know what I mean? You have to eventually get out of that way of thinking. You have to kind of pick yourself up and, get on with what you need to do. Now, with Anthony, he was having a bit of problems at home with his family. There was a lot of issues happening with his wife, some things happening with his daughter, but his daughter was someone that he loved more than anything. And he says that multiple times in multiple videos. And, that was pretty much his only reason for living. So I'm not too sure what happened, on his final days, why he ended up committing suicide. But, I'm sure that it had something to do with his family having a bit of a rift in it, because I mean his daughter was his life. I mean he always said, no matter what, doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter how bad I am, you know I'd never end up doing anything silly, because she's what I want to live for. So I'm not really sure what pushed him over the edge, and it's still not clear to anyone what really pushed him over the edge. And I've really tried to research this, but it's hard to find. And people were saying even on his last day he was fine, he was happy. He didn't show any signs of that. He was going to hurt himself. And look, I mean, I've personally experienced that same thing with people where they seem fine one minute and then just they snap. There's just something in them that snap. So I actually had a friend that had a very similar experience, and this actually happened after a poker game that we had at my place. So we were all there just having a good time. He was having a good time. He was really happy, and he's like, saying stuff like, "Oh, I really love catching up with you boys. Like this is the best time. I finally get to just relax and just unwind and whatever." And anyway, so when he's got home, he was probably home for about 2 hours, I'd say. And then I get a call from his next door neighbor, which was also one of my friends that drove him home that night. And they said that he tried to hang himself. Now that shocked all of us, because like he was so happy when we were playing poker. Like, he was laughing, he was just in a really good place. And we just thought, wow. Like, I mean, we knew he had some psychological issues, but he always seemed happy when he was around us. So I don't know what happened between then and then. I mean, there was obviously something that snapped in him, but he tried to hang himself, and luckily enough, they were able to stop him, and they were able to, get him out of it. Now, I did talk to him after he, got out of, getting treatment, because he did have to go to first a 72-hour kind of lockdown, where he's in hospital, where they just, assess you, just make sure everything's okay. So they call it a medical assessment, or psychological assessment, sorry. And so he was under that, and then they said that he did need further help, so he did have to go away for a little bit just to get that help. And yeah, about 6 months or so later, I did see him again, and he just said, he's like, I heard voices in my head. He's like, I heard my dad calling me. He just said this is the right thing to do. And the weird thing is that his dad wasn't dead, so I really don't know what he meant. Like, I mean, I obviously try to understand it a bit more, but he's pretty much just saying the same thing. And I didn't want to press the issue, because I did know that it is a sensitive thing for him to talk about. But again, I was always like, look, man, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you. Talk to me, man. Don't ever get to that point where you feel like you can't talk to anybody. And he's like, it's not that I didn't feel like I couldn't talk to anybody, it just came all of a sudden. So it was a really scary thing. So it's one of these cases with celebrities as well, where people try to figure out why they do things, and sometimes I just think that they don't even know why they do it themselves. Especially with Anthony Bourdain's case, like, I mean, I'm sure that there was like an underlying factor to why he did what he did, but I mean, I'm sure that the drugs and alcohol didn't really help. But at the same time, I kind of feel like there was something else that was really deeply there that he just couldn't kind of address himself, and then ended up, taking his own life. And look, I mean, he was going through therapy, and he was also going through drug rehab and alcohol rehab and things like that, but clearly didn't help. And again, sometimes I think it's also the therapists that are sometimes to blame, because I think kind of relating to their patients and trying to get on the same level as them is something hard for them to do, because a lot of these people that are in these fields haven't actually experienced this themselves. So they're just kind of, I guess, doing guesswork. They're just reading papers, and they're trying to read studies and case files and things like that, and they try to make sure that they can make an assessment based on that. But unfortunately, if you've never experienced it yourself, you don't understand that mentality. You don't understand what people are going through, how they're thinking, some of the things that are really going to hurt. So I guess this is sometimes why it is hard for some of these guys to kind of really relate and kind of really understand how they can help their client, how they can fix these people and, you know, try to get them on a better path, or even just understand the fact that maybe that's not an option. Sometimes they're not going to be fixed. They, you know, it's just something that they are going to have to live with. But, you know, be more supportive of that. You know, I know it's not an easy thing to say, but sometimes if people are really depressed, you know, you can't just always tell them to, you know, just feel better or it's going to get better, because you don't see it that way when you're going through that. You really don't see it as, I'm going to feel better, this is going to end, you know. And it's really hard to explain to people because people don't understand that concept itself. I mean, they're slowly understanding it these days when they're doing a lot more studies for mental health, but it's been a stigma that's been there for so long. And unfortunately, sometimes for these guys, it's been too late because they're just used to just dealing with it themselves because they can't relate to the people that they're talking to. So I am going to move on to the next celebrity now. And again, guys, if you're experiencing anything or any of these kind of things that are kind of, you know, making you feel like, oh man, I really do feel like that sometimes, or sometimes I can't talk to these people, man, reach out to me because I really do want to make sure that I can help you as much as possible. So let's move on, and we're going to be talking about Robin now. So with Robin Williams, we all know that he was one of these really, really amazing people, really happy people. Unfortunately, there was one thing that was really hard for him, and that was to switch off. Now, if you do actually look at this final interview, he does kind of talk about that to a point, but if you do also have a look at other interviews that he does mention this a few times. Like, he just can't feel like he needs to switch off because people aren't used to him being that way. They're kind of used to him being this happy, you know, like over the top kind of crazy guy, you know, and they didn't actually understand that he's a person too sometimes. And I think that was the hardest thing for him to feel because, you know, as much as he was kind of upset, he didn't want other people to be upset because he was upset. So that was a really hard thing for him to kind of control, and it's a really unhealthy way to live, but unfortunately that's just his mentality. That's the way he thinks, you know. And, you know, he's got such a good heart that, you know, that's why he didn't want to, you know, hurt anybody. So with Robin Williams' case, I did say it was a little bit different. Now, what I did actually find out from doing a lot of research was, and this also came from his wife, is that he actually did have dementia, and he started to kind of slowly deteriorate, and he started forgetting things, and he started forgetting where he was. But he kind of felt like, you know, he wanted that control back in his life, but he just couldn't get it. Now, this is what ultimately took Robin Williams' life, because he wanted that control back. So it's a little bit different sometimes. And like I said, like with depression, there's different things. There could be an unknown reason to why you do it, or there could be an exact reason why you do it. But there's also, I mean, a gray area there, because there also are people where, you know, they just feel like, you know, they have no control, and they end up hurting themselves because they just feel like, you know, it's not that they want control back, but they just feel like everything's out of their control. And it's not so much getting that control, it's more just that they just don't want to deal with anything anymore. They're sick of being, you know, taken control of. Now, a lot of people confuse that with it's getting control back, and it's like it's not, because I mean, even me, I've been in that position where it's not so much of a control thing. It's more just like, you know, I just want everything to end. It's not because I wanted to end on my terms. It's just that I wanted to end in general. You know, whereas Robin Williams, he wanted it to end because, you know, he felt like, you know, this is way out of his control. You know, it just kind of feels like, you know, it's going to eventually get to a point where there's nothing he can do about it. And he's like, well, you know what? I want to do something about it now. I want to make sure that I can stop this from getting worse. Now, if you watch his interviews, listen carefully to what he says, because he does have a lot of deep kind of deep insight to what depression is and how he feels and how it is to even have things when you're dealing with it with drugs or alcohol or anything else. And you are going to see this theme a lot. Drugs and alcohol, an easy escape, or I wouldn't say an easy escape, that's probably a bad choice of words, but it's usually the go-to escape for a lot of people, you know. And I've had a lot of friends that have been the same way, you know, it's drugs or alcohol, sometimes both, and that's their escape because they just feel like, you know, this is the only time they kind of feel that release, I guess, or they don't have to worry about it, or they don't have to think about it. So this is why people heavily rely on this stuff. Now, the worst thing to do with someone in that position is to judge someone in that position, because the more you kind of make them feel bad about them doing doing those type of things, the more they're going to do it, because they kind of feel like, well, screw you. It's like, you don't understand my life. You don't know what I'm going through. So this is why I'm going to do these things. And, and a lot of these celebrities talk about it. And one that I didn't actually have in this video, but I am going to say, is Richard Pryor, because he actually did talk about some of those things where a lot of people tell him not to do these things. And he's like, well, screw you. He's like, because you're telling me not to do it, I'm going to do it. So you do have to kind of be careful of how you approach people when they are going through alcohol abuse or drug abuse. You have to really kind of understand why they're doing these things. It's not just a simple thing sometimes. Yes, there are some people that take advantage of it, and there's nothing actually wrong in their life. They're just just one of these people that just like to get high and just do stupid things. But there are people like Robin Williams and Chester, and like not just celebrities, but these are just people that are obviously well known in the world, that people can be like, okay, I can actually see their documentaries, I can hear their stories. Now, I wish there was just the common day person that you can always hear their stories, but you can't, unfortunately, because there's not too many people that like to step forward because of they're worrying about getting judged or not being understood. So it is hard sometimes. So that's the only reason I'm using celebrities at the moment. Now, as you can see with Robin Williams talking about this quote up above, he wants to try to make people happy because, he himself can't be happy. Now, a lot of people going through depression, or, really bad depression, I should say, feel that way. I mean, and I did talk about this in my previous videos. It's like sometimes I am feeling down, but I look like the most happiest person in the world because I don't want anyone to feel the same way that I'm feeling. I want them to feel happy. Now, it's a hard feeling to describe to people, and a lot of people will just say, well, nothing must be wrong because you're happy. You're an easygoing person and whatever, like, you don't get offended, or, we can talk about anything. And it's like, yeah, cool. But that doesn't mean that I'm not having bad thoughts in my head 24/7. Now, unfortunately, with people like Robin Williams, because he's always a happy person, he didn't want people to feel down because he's down. And that's what I said in the beginning of talking about Robin Williams. Like, he's that type of person that likes to always make people feel happy. And I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I really want people to understand that point, because people don't seem to realize how bad it can be for people that are going through depression but don't like to burden other people with that depression. Some people like to burden people, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. There's some people out there that constantly, make their workplace a hard place to work, or sometimes, their family life, it's really hard because they don't want to take responsibility themselves. They don't want to try to step up and be like, hey, I want to try to help myself. I want to try to make sure that, I can get to a better place. They blame it on everyone else. And yes, maybe those people might be the reason that they're feeling that way. But sometimes you do have to be that person that you have to be like, okay, I'm going to try to take control. I'm going to try to fix it. Because that's the only way you're going to know. Now, unfortunately, it's not always a cure. It's not always going to be the way to fix these type of things. But it can help. And, I mean, there are people that are able to break the cycle, that are able to, get out of that way of thinking. But you can't do that unless you try. And again, it doesn't work for everybody, but if it does have a chance to work for you, give it a try, because you'd rather find out if it does work rather than feeling this way 24/7, always feeling depressed. So I'm going to move on to the next celebrity now. So I'm going to be talking about Chester. So Chester is one of these guys that I really had a lot of respect for, because he did try to do a lot of stuff for mental health as well. He did try to explain the best he could to people what mental health was like, what it's like to go through therapy, what it's like to have really deep depression. And, what really kind of annoyed me is people calling him a coward for end up taking his own life, because, he kind of really didn't practice what he preached and all this stuff about, him saying that you need to get help, you need to, try to make sure that you can get medical help if possible, whether it's, getting them to give you medication, or whether it's them going through therapy. And a lot of people call this guy a hypocrite, and it's like, or just, taking the easy way out and things like that. And it's like, how screwed up can you be? And I couldn't believe reading some of these comments, and it really frustrated me reading this type of stuff, because for one, he's not a coward. He got to a point in his life where he just really couldn't handle it anymore. And, he just felt like whatever he was going through, it wasn't getting better. And I understand that fully. Like, I know what it's like. And he even said, like, and this is what was kind of interesting, that he talked about when he was speaking to a therapist. And he said that these serial killers that lack emotions, and I can't remember the exact word that he uses, and I probably could have googled it before, but you know, I'm already here now, so too late. But people that lack emotions and kind of, don't feel anything, he felt envious of those type of people because he felt like he just wished he could switch off completely. Now, the therapist didn't understand what he was saying, and they're like, "Really, you wouldn't want to feel that way?" And I get it to a point because I mean, if you lack any type of feeling, you're not going to feel happy, you're not going to feel sad, you're not going to feel anything. But feeling happy is probably one of the best feelings you can have. And I know Chester didn't mean it in that way, where he's saying I never want to feel happy or anything like that. But I know at the same time what he's trying to say is that he just doesn't want to feel the way he feels. And you can hear it in some of his songs, and even the title of this video that I'm saying right now, this is a direct quote from one of his songs, and sometimes, goodbye's the only way. And like, that's how he felt. Sometimes, he's saying like, solutions aren't so simple. Like this is the best way I can deal with things. And if you do look at the song Shadow of the Day, he does say that, it's dealing with dark and light. And, he was talking slightly on political issues too, but then if you listen to some of his later interviews, he does also talk about how some of his songs really heavily impacts how he feels on a day-to-day basis. And this is how he's able to come up with these amazing songs, and he's one of these guys that tried his best to deal with his issue. Like he said, he's a person that he wants to be out of his own mind. He'd rather be a father, he'd rather be an entertainer, he'd rather be anything else than how he feels as just being Chester. And I know for a fact a lot of people hear that and they'll be like, I don't get it. What does that mean? But he is Chester. He's the one that feels that way. And it's like, no. What he's trying to say is that he feels that he wants to be someone completely different. He doesn't want to be in that state of mind. He wants to do anything he can to distract himself. And he wants to not focus on being himself. He doesn't want to focus on those thoughts. So with other people, and like even with myself, I get it to a point, and not everyone kind of feels that way when they have depression. Sometimes people just feel like, I want to escape. I want to get away from the place I'm living. This will make me feel better. Now, unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case, but not always, because your problems follow you. If you don't deal with your problems and you don't find a way to reflect on your issues, they will follow you like no tomorrow. And I always stress this to people. I always say you need to make sure that you focus on what's affecting you. You need to really find what that problem is, because if you don't, it's going to get worse and worse. You're going to just feel like it's going to be beating you down. Doesn't matter if you move, doesn't matter if you change jobs, doesn't matter what you do. It's going to beat you down, and it's going to make sure that you stay that way unless you really tackle what that issue is. And sometimes people need that guidance, and that's why they get therapy. But again, like I've said, sometimes I blame the therapist because the therapists don't relate to the people and what they're going through. So I just wish there was an easier way for people to get work, especially if you've gone through these type of things. But you do need to get the education. You do need to go through all these different hoops. But I mean, look, it's like anything, right? I mean, that's just how it is. But sometimes people don't like how real you can get with patients. And I do know with a lot of organizations that, they do have, I guess, trigger warnings because they're worried about people doing silly things. But at the same time, when you're holding back what reality is and what these truths are, sometimes people feel like, well, you don't understand what I'm saying, so I'm just going to do what I want to do because you really don't understand me. And a majority of people going through that feel that way. And I know for all the ones that I've gone through and all the ones that my friends have gone through, they felt the exact same way. And that's the one thing that we always say, the therapist just doesn't understand, or my family doesn't understand, my friends don't understand. And that's why you usually only find a small group of people that you can really open up to. So I'm going to do this final celebrity before I actually end this video. So the last one we're going to be looking at is DMX. Now his one is completely different from all these guys because it wasn't suicide. He didn't take his own life. He didn't kind of feel like, he lost control. However, there is an issue that I want to address, and it's relapse. So this also does come part and part with depression, and I'm going to explain why. DMX was one of the greatest rappers pretty much in the 90s and 2000s, and he was insane. Honestly, I loved his music. But one thing that he did deal with was depression and drug abuse. And he relapsed a lot. And I'm gonna link a video down below, and I want you guys to watch what he's saying and listen to what he's saying and see how he feels. I mean, he literally breaks down at one point because I guess people just don't understand what it's like to relapse. They kind of just think that it's one of these things that you deal with it once, you can get over it, and you can just be that strong person because you've managed to stop doing whatever you're doing. So whether it's abusing drugs or whether it's abusing alcohol or whatever it is, maybe it's anger issues, and they just kind of feel like once you stop for that short amount of time, you should be able to stop forever. That's not the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is, it's something that's like a dark passenger. It's something that's always there. It's always going to be in the back of your head. Now, DMX didn't die from suicide. He died from, a heart attack or heart failure, I should say. So I'm sure at the same time, the drug abuse and the relapse and all that didn't really help with his condition. But at the same time, the one thing that he did kind of struggle with was, telling people how he felt and, getting people to really understand, that he does have these feelings and that he does want to try to escape from that type of reality. He wants to kind of stop kind of feeling the way he feels sometimes. And that's why he relapses. And sometimes it could be, it could be the smallest thing that sets you on a relapse. It could just be, I don't know, just a bad day. Sometimes it could just be just a bad phone call. It could be anything, that can just automatically get you to think, you know what, I've gone 30 days without doing what I need to do. So maybe if I just do it this once, I can go another 30 days. It's fine. It's just this once. And that's where the problem is because you end up, just taking that, that 1 second to make a bad judgment call and then you end up relapsing again. Now, again, that can be for alcohol, it could be for drugs, it could be for whatever, like I said. Now, DMX try to tell people what it's like to relapse. Like he really tried to stress what it's like to relapse and what it's like to go through drug addiction and things like that. And I always see that the people that he talks to really don't get it. And you can see even the interviewer that he's talking to really doesn't get it. And it's what frustrates me because I'm kind of like, why the hell are they getting someone to interview this guy that can't relate to what he's talking about? And it's one thing that I hate about the media, and it's one thing that I hate watching with interviews. It's like you have these mindless idiots that do these interviews and really can't relate, and you have guys in his situation that kind of feel like, I need people to understand. I want this message to get out to people so they really feel like, they can relate or, they can really understand this message. And you get someone that's asking dumbass questions to how he's feeling or doesn't even hit the nail on the head about how he's addressing these topics. So it is quite frustrating for celebrities sometimes because, they just want to really get a message out there, but you have someone that's always like, oh, but what happens if this happens or what happens if that happens? It's like, dude, just listen to what the guy's saying. If you want to address those issues, address it in a separate, kind of topic, but listen to what this person's saying because they're trying to say that they've tried to get help, they try to get therapy, they've gone through all the hoops and they've tried to do the best they could and it didn't help. So I really do get frustrated sometimes when watching, interviews, especially when it comes to stuff with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, like even stuff with domestic violence. I mean, I know it's never good to be that type of a person that's that angry that you end up hurting somebody. But again, if these people are having mental health issues and they don't have a way to deal with it and they don't have a way to deal with that anger, they don't have people that can understand that anger, then obviously they're going to get to that point. So the one thing that I did want to say in this video, and the one thing that I want you guys to take away from this video, is that if you need help, yes, get it. Again, like I said, for me personally, it didn't work. I mean, I'll talk about my own personal experience. For some of these guys, it didn't work. They did try to get the help. They just couldn't find that person to relate to. But you might be lucky. You might be a person that can relate or find someone that's going to relate, sorry. And if you're a friend that's listening to this and you know that, one of your friends is going through depression, be that person to support them because sometimes they might not be able to get that help for a therapist or from a therapist, I should say. So be that support person for them. Try to help them out. If they are going through drug addiction or alcohol addiction or whatever it is, or if they're feeling depressed, you don't have to be abusing alcohol or drugs because I don't abuse alcohol or drugs when I'm going through my stuff. But, it doesn't mean that I don't have issues. And again, sometimes you just have to kind of look at what that person's going through, make sure they're okay. Check up on them from time to time. If they're getting really dark, try to find a way to talk to them and get them out of that habit. but at the same time, don't judge them for feeling that way. You hear from them every single time, and that's how they feel. You might talk to them, every month, and they're just like, man, I feel depressed, I feel bad, I feel crap. Don't judge them on that, because they're not going to change that mentality. Like, just because you tell them, hey, you need to snap out of it, you need to get better, you need to do stuff like that. Like, no, they're not going to change. But at the same time, try to show them that there is a way that you can start feeling better. Maybe you take them out for a drink, something, I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be a drink, you can guys just hang out, just have a talk. Sometimes they might be able to get something off their chest and feel a bit better. Now, for a lot of people, it's a lot of work, and I understand that people don't have that time in their life sometimes because of their other commitments. Could be work, could be family, could be whatever. But at the same time, if you can be that type of person, that support person, try to do that, because you don't want your friend to end up hurting themselves. And I know it's a big responsibility, but then also don't judge them because they end up going, back to their old ways. Because sometimes it's hard to break your habits. I mean, even me, I've come a long way since I was younger, especially with my anger and everything else. But there's times that it's hard. Like, there is weeks or months that I just can't get out of, like, the way I'm feeling. And I try to make sure that people understand that, like, look, yes, I'm a supportive person, whatever, but at the same time, there's days that maybe I might not talk, I might not be socially active because, I'm going through a depressive state, and sometimes, I mean, I'm the type of person that I won't personally post it up about how I'm feeling or talking about how I'm feeling, like, people don't know what's happening in my life. They don't feel like, something bad is going to be happening. But I don't want people to think that way. I don't want people to kind of, be upset because I'm upset. Like, so like I said, I really understand sometimes how Robin Williams felt on that side. And he's one person that, like, I really do understand his mentality. And a lot of these guys, a lot of their stories, it all kind of comes together. But again, as you can see, for each one of these guys, they had their own unique experience. They had their own reasons for doing these things. And, it's such a broad thing, I mean, there's not one specific incident to make you feel this way, and it's why it's so hard to hit the nail on the head sometimes. But the best you can do is try to be empathetic to these people. Try to put yourself in their shoes, and just try to imagine that there might be some people out there that just can't escape the way they're feeling. Now, if you kind of understand that, it's going to be hard for these guys to feel comfortable around you. And this is why a lot of the time people don't want to go out, because they don't want to burden people. They don't want to kind of make them feel like, they're going to drag the mood down. And I'm definitely one of those type of people. If I'm feeling bad, I don't want to drag the mood down, so I'll stay away from everybody. So I am just going to wrap it up here. Guys, I just want to say a big thank you to anyone that's made it to the end of this video. And remember, if you do need to talk, if you do need any support, please make sure that you go to my Instagram page, shoot me a message on Space Kai Continuum. I'll be more than happy to speak to any of you guys about any of these problems. Or if you want more information, please let me know, whether it's about the video, whether it's about depression, whether it's about a certain thing that you're going through in life. I'm always happy to kind of be there and help out whenever you need. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I really do appreciate it. And please feel free to subscribe or like. Any of those will definitely help me to create more videos in the future. And guys, I hope you have a great day and take care.